where's the banner? Here. Does anyone have
It and then I agree with you.
Yeah,
I opt out. I don't want to say this. Yeah, big people. Yeah, big hands. You know.
Thank you.
We put on the CD. I should have diagnosed me in something in this week.
The motion is this house as a British.
This is an athlete from a former British colony who would not join the
Proceed. It's Commonwealth Games.
Hey, CG, you guys got the motion right?
Alright, hi guys, welcome to round 3 of APU Novice. My name is Alex and I'll be chairing the round for today. Pending with me will be Darshan and Giri. Yeah. So on the motion that this house as a former athlete of the British colony would not attend Commonwealth Games. Yes. Yes, please.
Oh, yeah, please.
I'd like to invite the Prime Minister without further ado, please.
As a proud member of your own nation, representing your country to participate at this sporting event, not only you're representing the nation itself, but you're representing the nation's identity, culture, and history. Therefore, as that athlete within this motion, is particularly controversial for him to join the Commonwealth Games, but in a context where you're competing with your former colonial masters who have not recognized the past atrocities and exploitation done to your people and your nation itself. We say that the fact that the formation of Commonwealth, the idea of putting all nations under this equal level, which means they're asking everyone to forget the past and work together for a formidable future. It's not actually something that is right to do when you ignore all the atrocities done by your colonial masters. We're talking about the fact that racial division is still happening within India, or even past exploitation that caused current economic divisions that still exist within these developing countries. We think that we shouldn't let Britain go past by these past crimes. And as an athlete of that particular community that's been affected by these actions, we think is vitally justified for that athlete to choose not to participate within the Commonwealth game, right? Because whatever the athlete do during the event, it represents the nation's stance and its own community stance on that controversial issue itself. Imagine yourself from Gaddafi, right? In the famous place where British Army face off against Indian rebels, in fact, that caused thousands of people being killed and massacred, right? In that particular area, you were taught that was a tragedy. But in Britain itself, it's been taught as a military achievement by Winston Churchill itself. That form of lack of recognition of atrocity is what drives this athlete to question himself whether or not his own identity matters, right? The fact where you that the fact that Britain's act, that you're joining in an organization that been orchestrated by Great Britain itself, and you're participating both as equals, which means that whatever atrocity done by Great Britain is legitimized. The fact that whatever they do for their country or all the atrocity done is okay, and therefore you shouldn't question it, right? So that's the basis of our case, right? So before I move on to how why we shouldn't let these things to be ignored, instead be recognized, I'll take opening.
USA bombed Nagasaki, Hiroshima in War II, and it ravaged Japan. Now Japan is still maintaining good trade ties with the USA. Why can't Commonwealth countries be like Japan and progress towards a peaceful world, right?
Well, the very difference is America recognized their fault in dropping the bomb, in comparison with Britain still to this day has not made sufficient reparations to amount of exploitation from the people, and also recognize famines, famines and massacres committed by them. The difference in two contexts is where one nation does recognize all the harm that they've done and put that within its own history books that they recognize otherwise, right? This can recognize. So moving on to the point that how this would impact the athlete's performance as a whole. The fact that this fact bothering you is hard to distinguish yourself to within the sport itself. So we think that question of whether or not that you're competing with a nation, I'll take over.
Sure, Britain might have committed a lot of atrocities in the past, but do you deny the fact that by the same time, many economies would never have been established without them, and they provided protection from, let's say, the communists?
We don't think that's partially exclusive to form alliance with Great Britain. Even all the benefits that they've done, the fact that you do not recognize all atrocities, which means that these nations still live under the past of these great colonial masters, right? The fact that the illusion that all nations are equal within a Commonwealth is an illusion, and all these nations have not lived out the past of the rule by Great Britain. And so what I told you today, I told you that many of structural problems are happening within third world countries, within Africa, Asia, are all due to the past of colonial Great Britain, and is morally unjust to assume that Great Britain can be left out of all its past atrocities and live as equal with all these nations. And I will also tell you that how this is particularly shameful for an athlete that comes from these regions and communities that have been affected and is being ignored by their nations, politicians, and just be a part of it. And we think that this athlete, because of it, has a right to leave out for not participating in these games. With that, we propose.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I'd like to invite you on position.
this form of celebration is something really dire coming from our opening opposition side. We think this is the only platform for us to have a proper proper discussion whether how we achieve peace at the end of the day. So basically, this kind of diplomatized and formal way in order for us to actually celebrate peace and whatnot, we block with our paradigm coming from our opening government side. So as a leader of opposition, I'm going to give you the bit of proof in order for us, like opposition side, to win this debate, and our government side need to move on to rebuttals and my principal justification and my arguments, right? So firstly, the burden of proof came from opposition side. In order for us to win debate, is that we're going to show to you how the progression for those countries to move on with the war that we faced before this, we better understand the house in order for us to move towards progression of globalization better understand the house. So basically, opening for the government side, in order for them to win this debate, is that they're going to show to us how a country can progress better under the assault of the house the moment those developed nations already put a bad stereotypes towards them, deny. So let's see the rebuttals for the Prime Minister, right? How she said less recognition for atrocity made by these colonial countries, right? So basically, firstly, I say it is wrong to begin with. Secondly, is that you got to understand that Commonwealth Game is the only platform for us to actually show how we celebrate this kind of thing, and it's the only platform for us to actually show to this country already move on to begin with. Given POI from my deputy leader of opposition, how US and Japan, the moment US already bombed Japan and whatnot. So basically, this already shows how the relation between these two countries are already good to begin with. That's the reason why we want Commonwealth Game to actually move on. That's why we need you as athlete to go to Commonwealth Game to actually celebrate this kind of thing and make sure you already respect. We already moved on with the conflict we already faced before, and you also apply within Malaysia also, right? Or how we already there is conflict between the Malaysia and Japan in before. So basically, it already shows on how Malaysia already have a good relation with Japan right now. So basically, that we didn't see any strong reason why we shouldn't go to Commonwealth Game, because the reason why the more you didn't go is only to encourage more harms towards your own country, right? But even if Commonwealth Game is not a perfect platform, you got to understand there's no other platform for you to actually go to target a big audience to begin with, right? Because we think that actually Commonwealth Game is the only platform for you to actually approach a bigger scale of countries to be compared with approaching them one by one to begin with. Before we move to principal justification, why not?
Yeah, so what about like the Southeast Asian Games or the Olympics, which are like much more important and provides you much more opportunities in the long run?
So basically, this is different thing. Like the aim of Olympics is different to be compared with the aim of Commonwealth Games to begin with. That's the reason why we are debating on Commonwealth Games in this debate, right? Moving to principal justification, what are the aims of Commonwealth Games to begin with? This is the problem where the Prime Minister didn't analyze since the beginning. You got to understand there are three main reasons why there are Commonwealth Games to begin with. Because the first reason is we want to celebrate the peace that we have right now. So basically, the moment we already celebrate the peace, it means that we appreciate the efforts of the fighters that already died before for our own country and for us to achieve this peace to begin with. The second reason why is that we're going to show to you how at least our country already progressed, we already moved on with the problems that we had before in order for us to actually move towards globalization together to begin with. And then lastly, the aim of the Commonwealth Games is really important, right? How we're going to make sure that all countries that within this Commonwealth Games already understand and they want and already understand what's the aim, which is we don't want to fight against each other anymore. So basically, this game is the only place for us to commemorate all the fighters that already died before, and the only way for us to remind each and every country to not fight against each other anymore. This thing also applies towards Independence Day, right? Why do we celebrate Independence Day to begin with? We celebrate Independence Day to actually appreciate the effort being put by the fighters before, the effort being put by our Prime Minister before, right? So basically, Independence Day also equals to Commonwealth Games, right? Where actually we appreciate their effort and whatnot. So basically, the outcomes of principal justification is that I want to show to you how you already show towards this particular country that we already move on to begin with and already appreciate the effort put by the fighters before. Yes.
Speaking of platform, don't you think that the message will be more stronger when countries like India or Malaysia pull out the fact that it further pushed the Great Britain to recognize all these atrocities?
I'm going to answer that question under my argument later, right? So basically, my argument today is why do we think that progression is really important to begin with, right? In order for us, the reason why we go to Commonwealth Games is that we will show to you how we already move on. We will show to you how our country progress towards other countries, and other countries should like follow us, or maybe we should follow other countries' method for them to actually moving towards globalization. So first analysis is that we want to show to you. So the moment at the point of which you go to a Commonwealth game, is that more likely for you to actually show to the other countries that you already moved on in terms of economy or governance and whatnot. Because you got to understand that actually Malaysia back then you only have a monarchy, right? A monarchy where the sultans sultans itself made all the decisions, and if he wanted to kill that particular community as a whole, we're going to do it straightly, right? So basically, these are the problems. The moment at point of which British came into Malaysia, so then the point of which we see they already brought a positive changes towards Malaysia itself. So see what happened to Malaysia right now. We already have a constitutional monarchy, we already have parliament and whatnot, right? So there's a point of that's the thing where we think that actually the British itself. That's a point of which we think that we shouldn't like put your harms towards we shouldn't say actually the British or didn't pay anything towards the harms that they put before, because they also bring a good moral values towards our countries to begin with in terms of governance and whatnot. And even if that thing is too long in Salzburg, we can see how in terms of economy, right? We already have diplomatic ties within the European Union and whatnot. But at the point of which you got to understand, if you didn't go, you're only going to paint a bad perception to your own country, right? Because after this, more likely for those developed nations to see you, to perceive you as enemies because of your go against us, because you protest, because of you didn't want to go to the Commonwealth Games. You're going to make a bad perception towards your particular country, and what's going to happen after this is less likely for you to have a better diplomatic ties with those with particular countries that you need to have in order for us to move towards globalization. Well, so basically, this is only going to put harm towards your own psyche, right? Because at least your own psyche have a bad perception towards this particular country and whatnot. So basically, your country will live in a one-minded perception at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you for the speech. Now, to invite Deputy Prime Minister to defend the case for self-government. Thank you.
Cool. Britain and its colonies are not equal. Coming up here and saying that we are the same people, let's hug and get over the past where we fucked up all of your Indian people with super ass Winston Churchill rules. We think it's very stupid for the opposition to come up here and say that we're bloody people. America and Japan at one point of time may have bombed each other, but they did recognize that, okay, we bombed you, let's get over it, but they apologized, and that apology was accepted by Japan and whatnot. We don't accept it from our side. We tell you that from our side, it's not from coming out from India or Bangladesh, we tell you that it's not okay for Britain to just say that let's get over the past, let's play some games together, and that's how it's gonna get better. No, it's not gonna get better. You have to recognize what you did. You have to recognize the fuck-ups that you did. You have to recognize the amount of economical displacement that you brought into these countries. You also have to recognize the best form of development is not Western development, right? So, a few things to elaborate. What would happen, from a standpoint as a former British colony athlete, if we choose to boycott this Commonwealth Games? As a former British colony athlete, if we choose to boycott the Commonwealth Games, we would send a clear message that whatever you're doing, we're not standing with it. We're not going to participate in it. What does that mean? That means that puts the British people, when they invite us to this, they have our names listed in there, but we decide not to go. What would happen is, if we do not go, then we show that we are not willing to participate in your events. We are not willing to participate in your whatever you have organized in order for us to rally into that event. And we're sending a message that we're not ready to forgive you yet. We're not ready to say it's okay for you. It's okay. Let's get over the past. Let's do some new trade economies. We're just sending out a clear message. If I, as an athlete, feel super bad about whatever has happened in the past, it is very much okay for me to boycott those events, because I have all of the rights to not go to that event, even if it means to some extent I'll have better connections and better, trophies and whatnot. Those trophies mean nothing to me at the cost of what it did to my nation, because at the end of the day, I'm an athlete from Bangladesh, right? I'm representing my country. So if I am representing my country, it is very hard for me to opt out of that country's identity that I have on my head. So if I choose not to represent my country as in that event, I send them there a clear message that we are not okay with this. But yeah, before I move on to the substantive, yes.
At what point, sir, do you wish to let go of this grudge that can potentially harm our country?
At the point where the reparations are very, very clearly better off. We don't think that the reparations that the British community, the British countries did are enough to us, and that I will explain here clearly. So the reparations are, they did not recognize how much they economically displaced us. They did not want to offer us anything back. All they said was, you are now independent and therefore you have rights, you have democracy, and then you're better off because you have democracy. We tell you that by giving us democracy, you also, the way that they segregated the lands within these countries are way super fucked up. You have a lot of India within Bangladesh, you have a lot of Bangladesh within India at the edges of these countries, and that is really wrong, because the uncles living within those countries are really having shitty lives. So they did not segregate properly all of these places. They did not really give us that benefit that they wanted to give us. They just made the thing much more congested and made us fight against each other, and that is really bad. And we still think that the British should be held accountable for this fucker. And what we can think that this was some form of a game to the British people, and then they found some clear joy to this, but they never fully tried to help us. They just wanted to let us go, make us independent, but at the same time, they didn't really make us independent. They made us into a state where Pakistan still fights with India. They made us into a place where still there is a fight over Kashmir, India and Pakistan part of Kashmir. They never resolved this kind of conflicts while they were leaving. They just left by keeping it in kind of a hingy situation where the fight still continues even if they go, right? And that is really bad for the British people, because when they colonized, they should have at least taken the responsibilities of those colonization and whatnot, right? So these are the kind of reparations that we want from the British authority to have coming to our side. And yeah, sure.
The Supreme British already asked for apology, and I already forgive them. Do you agree that my future generation will still go against British again to make sure they apologize again?
No. We need reparations. Clearly, whatever's happening is all because of them. We need more things coming to us. We need developments coming to us from those people. We need all of these rights that we have lost in the earlier times coming back to us, because that's what's important to us right now. Without all of this, we expect at least a form of more economical rights given to us, more trade options being available to us rather than within EU and whatnot. We want the Commonwealth countries to have more benefits, because the Commonwealth countries are the ones that has, historically been oppressed by this British colonies and whatnot, Britain, whatnot. So we believe that at the point when we make the standoff that we do not want to go to the SEA Games as an athlete, we are also protecting the dignity of that person, dignity of that country, and you have no right to take that away, no matter the status of the game. And even as we choose not to go to these games, we are also sending out a clear message that we are not willing to be a part of this yet. We are not okay with the past yet. Those who are okay can go, but we are not okay, so therefore we will not respect that. That's enough. And also, coming to the POI, let's extend on the POI asked from our closing, that they said that we still have Olympics and whatnot. We still have other games to compete to. That's it. That's exactly it. We have other games to compete to. We can get the same recognition that they're trying to push for from other avenues of games, right? We have Olympics, perhaps. We have other SAARC games and whatnot, South Asian country games, right? So all of these games being there, we think that it's just we don't need to specifically go to those Commonwealth Games just to get that form of benefit that the opposition is pushing for, right? So at the end of the day, save dignity, right, of these people and of these people representing their nations and whatnot. We don't actually tell these athletes not to go. We tell you as an athlete, I choose not to go, and that's okay. We don't stop these athletes from not to go, but as an athlete, if I choose not to go, that's okay. We tell you that the reparations haven't been made, so these athletes' choices are very much verified and valid. And we tell you that by that definition, we think we are taking a good. Thank you.
Thank you for that speech. I'd like to invite the leader of opposition to end the speech.
All that government want to talk about was just about reparations, right? Why should we have these reparations? Why can't these why these reparations are needed for these kind of Commonwealth countries to begin with? But they have never proven us a link to how these reparations may happen in the future. Because we don't think that just by you protesting in the Commonwealth Games can suddenly translate to like these UK performing reparations to your own these Commonwealth countries, right? What we think is basically it will cause more UK to become more radicalized and like less intensive for them to actually pay reparations, and I will show you how that will happen in my speech. But firstly, let's move on to a few things, right? I'm going to first move on to like a few rebuttals, then move on to like my main argument, which is directly clashing to the reparations argument. So let's move on to like the first things. Like now to clear up a few like principal justifications. Sure, we understand and realize that these are like these kinds of like all of these like things you said, this fuckery up, all these kinds of things that happen during these kinds of Commonwealth Games do happen. But I think that already, we think that it's time to move on, and I think that already these kinds of that the Commonwealth countries already accrued a lot of benefits for these kinds of like these countries to begin with. But we believe that this as an athlete, because like an athlete as a person, we should celebrate peace at all times. And believe that like this is the reason why the UN has like caused a lot of has demoted, has denounced decolonization to begin with. As a person, we should think that in order to celebrate these kind of things, we should go back to history, but we should go back to the things that we are in now. So we don't think that we should just dwell on like the past histories, but we should think on like what happens now, right? So that's like I want to stand a bit on like what my prime minister or my leader of opposition has said. Because firstly, if you can celebrate the decolonization of British, that's already a good thing. Because we think that already peace is already maintained in these kinds of places to begin with, right? It means that the British is known and like already has understood that these kinds of the Commonwealth countries have done injustices on these kind of Commonwealth countries, and this is already a good enough narrative to show that British lets them free, right? We think that in the circumstance that if Britain wants to carry out injustices, it can still happen because it's their own choice to think that to let them go in the first place, right? But secondly, also talk about how like the fighters, on how we can like better propagate the narrative fighters of the country, right? Because we think that as a person who like is patriotic and like wants to and loves their country, we think that the efforts towards independence of the country should be recognized as well. We think that all these efforts of fighters has led to Britain like denouncing decolonization, colonies to begin with, right? And I think that in this circumstance, so like we are not just like celebrating the UK for decolonization, we're also celebrating the fighters who have fought for this outcome to begin with. Before I move on to my argument, sure.
So going by your characterization, there's already a lot of colonial guilt from these like colonial countries, right? Recognizing this, why will they still hate us for hating them?
Okay, that's how like I'm going to integrate that with my first argument, right? So the first argument is on how reparations wouldn't happen. And like in your best case, if countries were to like force for reparations, how does the Commonwealth Games make this better? So like first you have to look on how like Britain is more like to condemn you to the point in which you protest, right? Because already Britain is a very big country, is a very developed country, it has a lot of ties with a lot of other countries, and this means that it can like its economic power, a lot of other things that they hold are very influential in these kinds of countries. What they say is more like to influence a lot of other countries which are around them, such as Europe and all these things, right? So we think that but the point in which like Britain is more like to condemn you, it hinders discourse from these kinds of like obvious reparations to begin with, right? Because the point in which like your country were to force for reparations, Britain wouldn't give it to you anyway, because they think that, oh, they're hating me, so why should I like actually like fight for like your own reparations, things like that. If you were to push on like global pressure, other countries trying to like push you, other countries trying to push like these trying to push for the Commonwealth countries to gain these reparations, we think it would happen anyway. Because I stated you before on how there's a large influence from the UK itself to actually support UK, right? There's a lot of countries that support UK itself, and already we think that discourse will not happen between them. But in your like in your best case, where if these kinds of countries were to make reparations, it would happen best under our side. Why? Because we think that discourse can better happen under our side, right? Because we think that when you assuming that country needs reparation so much, when they join the Commonwealth Games, it sets a diplomatic platform for both of these countries. We think that already it means that these countries are willing to progress for their willing to progress and willing to forego all these things that they have made done onto them, right? But this is so like if these countries were to think that, if these countries were to like feel that the reparations are so dire and so important, this is the point at which that they can get some form of reparation for these kinds of from Britain itself, right? Probably they can, in the very least, in our case, they can gain an apology at the very least. They can gain some form of recognition that the British knows they have done mistakes, that Britain has done a lot of injustice to these kind of countries compared to their world, in which like if their world would just force all these, if Commonwealth countries would just force all these countries to like just push for the narrative that, hey, Britain is bad, we should just stop, we should just cut ties off with Britain, it's just going to make the things worse. It's going to make things worse. So we think that the comparative is here. The comparative is that under our side, we can make sure that all these reparations, all these like pressure can still pressure and like discourse can still happen on our side, because we think that all of we can still think we have a diplomatic platform with the Commonwealth Games to begin with. You don't have a gap between Britain and these kinds of Commonwealth and also these Commonwealth countries. On their side, what they are trying to defend are kinds of these, they have to repay. We think that all these things cannot happen because the point at which Britain just continues to stop. Britain just continues to think that you are a country they have been already nice enough to let you go. Now you want to push for more, want to protest for more. You're not doing our Commonwealth Games is something that is going to feel angered by these kinds of things. We think that these kinds of narratives are important in ensuring that these Commonwealth Games that these Commonwealth countries do show that they have progressive values and do show that they can also get some form. They can also get some form of polarization from Britain itself. With that, I conclude.
For the speech now, to invite closing exchange, I'd like to invite member of government.
Insofar as injustice and inequity continues to plague these post-colonial nations and societies,
We believe that athletes as individuals who are also far more privileged than a lot of individuals in particular societies have a moral obligation to represent the states of these inequities and to also call out the pathetic excuse of the Commonwealth Games and how they call it compensation for everything they've done. We're going to be very different from opening government in 2 ways. Firstly, we're going to be the first house to talk to you what it means as an individual, for your particular society, and for your nation to refrain from the participation of Commonwealth Games. We're also going to conclude a lot of things coming up with opening government. We talked about reparations. We'll tell you what these reparations look like, what we would like the United Kingdom to do in the long run, and we'll give you this particular analysis in my speech, right? Before I move on to the 2 things I'll posit to you. Firstly, on the obligation analysis of these athletes, and secondly, I'll talk to you about tokenistic reparation and why we hate that. Just one big response to the entire case coming out from opening opposition. So this whole assumption of how we are already at peace. So post-colonial nations are already at peace and they're happy with what they're going through, right? That's a massive assumption, right? I pointed out multiple cultural practices that were drowned out because of the anglicization of particular societies that they colonized, right? All of these things, and I'll point out later on, far more harmful things for particular minorities, are not states of peace. So don't be fooled by the characterization that came up of opening opposition. These countries like India are far more unhappy than they were prior to being colonized, right? So that's the first characteristic we have to deal with. Secondly, on this assumption of how all diplomatic relations will have to be traded off with these nations just because we retaliate against Commonwealth Games. First thing to point out, there are a lot of Commonwealth nations that provide a lot of economic benefits to a lot of nations like the United Kingdom, which is a service sector economy. So just by that analysis alone, I'm less inclined to believe that they're going to cut out all economic trade, right? Because that's just suicide, especially with Brexit happening right now. But also, this whole idea that this is the very example that came up with opening opposition proved to you why they are wrong, right? This whole idea about US and Japan have never come to terms with what they have actually hated. They never come to terms with the fact that Hiroshima and Nagasaki have never actually accepted the deal, but can continue to have economic trades and look past that is already the very kind of examples that prove to you why on the our side they won't want to cut off these economic trades, right? At the very least, on the our side, you have that leverage, that bargaining chip that allows you to ask these individuals, these nations, these colonial nations, to give us better things, right? What are these better things? I'll talk to you about it. Before I move on to the tokenistic reparations, I'll talk to you firstly on the obligation analysis, right? What does it mean for an individual to say, no, I'm not going to compete in the Commonwealth nation? Firstly, much like how Colin Kaepernick kneel down during the national anthem, right? Every athlete has the ability and also has the obligation to cater to the injustice in their particular society. So recognize that sports and politics does not have to be independent of each other. In fact, when it overlaps, it creates a stronger voice that is important for minorities and important for individuals who are oppressed. The same principle applies here. When athletes that are supposed to represent the nation on a Commonwealth level choose to refrain from these sports, firstly, they're more likely to receive more media attention about the things that they hate, that they are trying to retaliate against. They're more likely to get a lot more exposure on the kinds of things they're talking about, and they're more likely to talk about this, to get attention on these things, right? But also, what does it mean to continue to participate? Firstly, it means you endorse what happened in the past, right? You endorse that it's okay, that we move past this. That's the most important thing. But secondly, you also celebrate the moving of the moving beyond what has already happened, right? So we think these are all untrue and unfair, right? Let me nuance this further for certain minorities. Let me explain to you what actually the cultural practices that were crowded out, right? So things like matriarchal structures that existed prior to the UK coming in and giving patriarchy and saying this is the only way to go. So especially for gender identity, in terms of gender identity, right? Prior to the British involvement in Malaysia, there were a lot of tribes out there that believed in multiple genders and did not have the binary that continues to oppress a lot of individuals in status quo right now. For an athlete, there are 2 levels here. Okay, firstly, if you belong to these particular minority groups, it is your right and your obligation to stand up for the communities and say, we hate the fact that you introduce these things. These inequities continue to exist in the world that we live in today because we don't have things like toilet laws, we don't have things like the ability to identify as a particular gender on birth certificates and identification cards. All of these are tangible harms that exist in the world today, and because of these inequities, we refrain from saying that we celebrate the fact that you were involved in our history, right? But if you don't belong to these minorities, you still have a moral obligation to care for these inequities. Because if you continue to participate, remember, you celebrate and endorse the fact that we move past this. Quoting opening opposition, just because we celebrate Independence Day, it means we celebrate what has happened in the past. That is false. We can celebrate Independence Day as us seceding from everything that they have done to us, but we can continue to hate. These are not exclusive things that can happen separately, right? Next, on this idea of tokenistic reparation, I'll talk to you especially on
are we very specific in terms of what kind of reparation we want, right? So like I pointed out earlier, there are a lot of like problems that are already entrenched in society right now. So things like the normalization of Anglican norms, the things like starting out of cultural practices that were very meaningful to a lot of minorities, to a lot of groups that existed in like Tanah Melayu or like in any like particular post-colonial nation, right? All of this were carted out under the facade of progress. That means all of the UK came in and they said, okay, this is the right way to go, and you have to buy into this. This is the only narrative. And unfortunately, we were in dire need, so we had to buy into that because of all the power that they had, all the economic leverage that they had to use over us, right? So we didn't really have a voice to voice out. What does this mean? What is the things that we can get if we have this bargaining chip under our world and not in opposition's world, right? Things like ensuring that we can say we don't want to participate in the compensation to all Commonwealth Games, we want proper reparations. What do I mean by this? So, for example, in like Lesotho, when the Britain involved in something like build a railway line for these particular nations, for Lesotho to like restructure its particular economy, right? For all these post-colonial nations, they don't really have a bargaining chip, so they have to deal with like tokenistic reparations. So they won't go like comparatively at our side, we can get far more funding in terms that are regulated by international bodies such as the World Bank or such as the European Development Bank, and allow these money to be channeled in and channeled to these other nations, right? We allow them to have some kind of leverage to say we don't want to participate in economic activities with you, and that's a cost you're going to have to pay because of the fact that we don't want to engage, we don't want to engage in this particular conversation because we're unhappy. We want you to continue to have the colonial debt. That colonial guilt will have to be relieved with education. We are the ones in our inside. You have to win. That is on the outside side, in the side, in the area of our power. On the other side, minority, rest, not have one voice on the time. They got saying it's a we're the ones talking now. Side government today has continuously pushed how Britain is the bad guy, how Britain is this horrible country that has completely oppressed and done nothing good whatsoever. And don't be fooled by white side government or the characterization that the previous speaker has tried to push on you. True, Britain has done many atrocities, but Britain isn't always the bad guy. Britain has established many economies. Britain has provided protection. Imagine what the world would be like if instead of Britain coming in to colonize these countries, instead the communists from let's say Russia came down and took over the whole of Asia. The world would certainly not be better off. I would like to talk to you about two things today, which is the national identity, how your national identity is reflected on the rest of the world, and the disadvantages of continuously holding a grudge against a country that will probably never be solved. Firstly, about nationalism. No, please sit down. I just started. What side opinion opposition failed to tell you is the fact that if you as athlete is state funded, okay, and these costs are not low. These costs are very high. As you as athlete refusing to represent your country, not only reflects badly to the people in your country, it reflects badly internationally. It shows that you as a country still have a grudge against Britain, who in real life have actually compensated quite a lot. They have given many economic benefits to the countries that were once in a colony, not only through colonies but through, let's say, the UN. They have donated much money. They have helped many economies. They have helped many economies across the world. Unlike the situation that South government is trying to push, and the fact that you US athlete representing a country refuse to take part in these Commonwealth Games just shows that your country just has this tiny grudge they're refusing to let go. Because I would like to read, because since no one in this debate has characterized what the Commonwealth Games are actually about. The Commonwealth Games aren't just a celebration of a person's of a country being in a British colony. The Commonwealth Games is a celebration of peace and how all the countries in the Commonwealth Games have gained independence. The fact is, as
a celebration of peace, you boycotting the celebration of peace means you're not willing to give peace to the country that you're not willing to give peace to the country that has in the end has given you independence. And secondly, on the fact that on the fact that side government is keep trying to push the fact that Britain will give you compensation for not joining the Commonwealth Games. There's like somehow Britain has this so much pressure if you decide not to join to represent a country, to show to the world that your country is good in whatever sports, or that you want to represent a country in order to prove to the world that your country is important. No, Britain won't care one bit if you don't join the Commonwealth Games. Sure, it's a form of protest, but it won't necessarily give you any leverage to make Britain do something. It's sure Britain acknowledge it, but that just because they won't crash their home economy and give all these benefits to you, all this stuff to your country simply because you didn't join the Commonwealth Games. It's just nonsensical. Yes.
We have countries like Japan and Korea that can still able to develop themselves without abiding to the ideas of Western ideology. Why do we need to conform to Britain's idea of being a good guy, and we need...
Okay, first of all, we do not need to conform to the idea of Britain being a good guy. It's been stated in global history, not just history in India, not just history in Pakistan, not just history in certain African countries. It's been global history that Britain was not the good guy. There's a reason why you all think that Britain is the villain here. Because in global history, it's been stated that Britain has massacred many people, has shut off many cultures. And Britain, we are not defending Britain's evil deeds. However, we are defending the fact that Britain has done good. Britain, unlike what the previous speaker has said, did not push the discrimination. Britain did. Sure, they might have at first. However, when they had the abolishment of, let's say, slave or gender equality and both genders allowed to vote, it was spread throughout the colonies to help equality in the countries. India's caste system existed before Britain came in. Britain tried to help that, but since Britain left, that is still in place even today. Many things, for instance, the economies of certain countries, the railroads that is built, have massively helped the economy, and modern people refuse to accept what the good that has been done, and simply choose to live in the past by saying that we want more, we will never be satisfied. Because no matter how much Britain gives, on a global scale, no matter how much Britain gives, many people will never be satisfied. The fact is that they can continue protesting. And at what point does Britain stop giving benefit? Because their economy clearly cannot handle such a thing with Brexit everything, as the previous speaker has mentioned. Okay, on to my next point, which is the best worst case scenario. Because on their best case scenario, sure, it's Britain's fault. They give compensation. They give and everyone acknowledges that it's Britain's fault, and Britain is forced to give compensation to all these countries, like they haven't already. Because the fact is, okay, so they benefit the country. And even under our worst case scenario, we are showing the world that we are the bigger person, that we're willing to let go of the grudge. Because sometimes moral benefits is much better than economical benefits. We're showing the world that we are the bigger person, and by that we do have a sort of leverage. Because instead of protesting, we're showing that we are accepting Britain's token of peace. That doesn't mean surrendering. That means accepting peace. Major difference there. And as showing to the world that we're a bigger person, even no matter what, so maybe we don't get some economical benefits, but we shouldn't keep relying on other countries to get benefit. We should show to the world that we as a country is good enough to develop by ourselves. The only way that the world acknowledge the country as relying on themselves and not relying on some other Britain to come in just because they harmed us a bit in the past. And so in conclusion, I have brought to you why it's harmful to on the global scale to national identity, why Britain won't give much benefit and why they won't care, what the Commonwealth Game really not good to continue to have a grudge against a certain country. And with that, I'm proud to oppose.
Good to end the debate.
We from side closing government believe that the fight for peace is still an ongoing issue, and participating in the Commonwealth Games would only be covering up all the underlying conflicts that are still going on and still being suffered by society. I'll do two things in my speech. First, I would deal with the rebuttals, and then I'll move on to what is the issue in this debate. Firstly, I only have one rebuttal to say. So, side opposition came out here to say that Britain wouldn't really care if people would start removing themselves from the Commonwealth Games. They wouldn't really care if there's going to be lack of participants. However, Britain does rely on other countries to sustain primary goods for them. They do rely on such thing as petrol or rubber. So Britain would have some form of care to actually, compensate for all the underlying issues that they created, to compensate for all the atrocities that they have created. Because Britain is an economy that is fully sustaining themselves. They do rely on other Commonwealth countries. And besides that, the economy of Britain would be heavily affected if these Commonwealth countries start removing themselves from participating in the Commonwealth Games, because then Britain will realize that it was unfair that all these countries that are participating in the Commonwealth Games are developing countries, and they are developed, and they are pretty much stable right now. But then all these countries that are facing all these problems are all developing countries, and then Britain would then have to realize, that these countries are now failing, and then they will tend to feel this colonial guilt. So they will feel the need to care, and they will feel the need to compensate for all these horrible atrocities that they have created. Moving on to my issues. So the issue in this debate is whether or not there's an actual peace within these colonized countries. So opposition came out to say that, we need to move on for a better globalization. Participating in the Commonwealth Games is like celebrating the peace. So, and there is already this form of peace that they are trying to claim. They said that what opposition wants us to do is to neglect all the atrocities that that is currently being faced by these Commonwealth countries. They want us to, what opposition wants us to do is to neglect all the cultural practices that the British have removed. Neglect all the implementation of all this patriarchy that was implemented because these British people came to our countries and took over our country. So side opposition wants to neglect all these underlying issues just so we could participate in the Commonwealth Games. They want us as an athlete. So side opposition believe that us as an athlete, we shouldn't care about our people. We shouldn't care about the minorities who have suffered so much because of these British people, all just because we should be selfish and because all we have to win is medals. All side opposition is trying to pose for you is that we shouldn't care for our people and all the things that we are still facing, because all we should ever care about is the medals, and only the medals are the only things that matter. So what we want from this debate, we want that Britain to officially and vocally denounce that they were wrong, and vocally denounce that yes, we have done all these horrible things, and we would like to take these back by compensating these developing countries, because now Britain is a very well-developed country, and all these other developing countries are now currently suffering because of all this. Things like patriarchy. Before Britain came into Malaysia, there were probably women weren't as inferior, but now because due to Britain entering these countries, women are now being inferior. There's no equal rights for women. Now they also tend to remove the cultural practices. Like last time, they're probably last time in these tribes, there were multiple genders, but Britain tried to impose the view that, having multiple genders is wrong. There should only be 2 types of genders. So we want them to publicly denounce the fact that they were wrong and to compensate for all of this. Yeah, sure.
By protesting, this will only put Commonwealth countries on a lesser moral high ground compared to if they join the Commonwealth countries, right? If the UK would think that Commonwealth countries would as not moral, then why is there incentive to apologize to these Commonwealth countries anyway?
No, see, the UK relies on us economically. If the UK wants to do well economic-wise, because they do rely on us for all these primary goods, such as I mentioned earlier, like rubber. So they will have to care and they will have to denounce all of this so that we will continue to support them and to further better their economy if they want to sustain. I'm going to continue now. I said earlier before that PY. So now we want Britain to denounce the fact that they were wrong, because we want Britain to say that they are sorry, and this would then empower the minorities, because the only way that Britain will ever say sorry and the only way that Britain will ever compensate for us is only when we have the bargaining chip. And this is only through not participating in the Commonwealth Games. You're not going to get any form of compensation. You're not going to get any form of apology if we do participate in the Commonwealth Games. Because like I said earlier, Britain does heavily rely on us to help sustain their economy. So Britain does have this moral obligation to cater for all the injustice in the society, because this would then, no thank you, I've already taken a POI. So this would then create this, as an athlete, this would then, if you're not participating, would create more media attention. You will have a stronger voice. So now people are going to pay attention to you. Oh, why isn't this country not participating in the Commonwealth Games? Then they're going to then understand all the underlying issues that the Britain did commit. They're going to realize that what they did was completely wrong, and that we should support these developing countries and help them overcome all these issues that were implemented because of Britain. And then this would then help with the patriarchal structures that Britain then implied. This will also help with all the issues in terms of genders that the Britain then tried to remove, because they thought that having multiple type of genders were wrong. This would then help all these changes. This will help to have all these more. This will then help generate all these new changes, and to also help all these developing countries become a better country and develop in the long run. Because, as mentioned earlier by Plupi, Britain, there's we want reparation. Britain would then have to provide us more funding, through the World Bank, if we only have this bargaining chip. If we do continue to participate in all this, participate in the Commonwealth Games, we will then just be conforming to the fact that yes, it's okay that you have done all these things. Yes, it's okay that you have installed this patriarchy system in our society. We will be just conforming to all the wrong things that they have done and neglect the fact that we need change and we deserve any form of compensation. So with all that, I'm very happy to propose.
Thank you for the speech. Now to end the debate, I'd like to invite opposition members. Thank you.
Rationalizing and comparing Britain to some of the other colonizing countries is essential before making a rash judgment about what they have done and before condemning them on so many levels. Instead, side-closing opposition would prefer to retain the moral high ground and be the bigger person, so to speak. Today, I'll be talking about three of the main clashes, which is mainly about the narrative that Britain has been spoken in, and secondly, should we forgive the British Empire, and if so, how should we act as an athlete in response? So, but before that, just a clarification. When opening government talked about when one of the government houses kept on talking about how they would instead of going to the Commonwealth Games, they would just go straight to the Olympics. We don't see that this jump happens. As an athlete, you have to go frequently to games to be able to be invited to go to bigger and more major games. So we don't see how boycotting the Commonwealth will end up giving you the experience needed to be able to qualify for bigger and more major games like the Olympics. Also, so on first, like the characterization of Britain. No, so what the government houses focus on mainly was the harms, and opening government talked mainly about how they caused like mutinies and massacres, and we agreed to some extent that there was conflict, but mainly because but it was also mainly because there were wars going on at the time. Britain colonized us before and after, and we see that this is also a major role at the time and setting, and not just because the British wanted to stir up a massacre. We also see that a lot of the conflicts that they bring up, like the Kashmir conflict, is also partly because the current states of in that region are unwilling to come to a compromise. We see that yes, perhaps the British Empire could have originated the conflict, but we see that why it's still going on is because of the current leaders. And we think it's dangerous for the leaders to be able to use Britain as a scapegoat to blame their problems on, instead of really trying to repair the country. And so on their side, their narrative and their characterization of Britain will end up to them in an outcome of wasting time on seeking reparations, wasting trade, trying in favor to seek this reparation, instead of actually trying to repair the country and actually trying to look at the situation, right? We think that things like corruption also hinders things like this, and it doesn't really have anything to do with the British Empire. And so we see that these accusations that they make, especially on opening government, is irrelevant. But for yes.
Simple question: do you agree or disagree that these inequities still happen? And if yes, why does your moral higher ground in preserving it has to come at the expense of all the minorities that currently suffer in the world?
The minorities now no longer suffer anyway, because of the colonies have already Britain has already relinquished control. And if you want to talk about cultural rights that were stripped off, we do see that it is a problem. But Britain has already apologized numerous times, for example, to the colonies of Australia, and we don't see it as something worthwhile to trade off the benefits that exist if you remain in peace with Britain and if you go to the Commonwealth. I just took one. Sit down. So moving on. So coming back to the characterization of Britain at first issue. So. We also, when we look at the characterization of Britain, we also have to compare it to other colonizing forces at that time, right? So we look at, for example, when the other communist countries, so for example, like communist China, when they tried to take over Malaysia, and we see that their reign was far more brutal and far more and caused a lot more suffering to the people, for example, in Malaysia. Why? Because they brought poverty. Because although Britain could have been a strong force, at least they brought like trade to Malaysia. At least they gave education to our people, and there is that baseline like benefits that we have compared to other narratives that could have been true. And so we see that when side government comes up and accuses Britain of these things without a real end goal and without a real outcome, we see that it's extremely dangerous and will end up doing damage if they want to destroy ties with Britain. So moving on to this whole idea of like, if we cut off ties with Britain, right? We see that there's no relevant link between not going to the Commonwealth Games and then getting a bargaining chip. At best, Britain might acknowledge that your presence is not there, but even then, we don't see how it will end up getting funds from the World Bank and everything, right? We see that this has not been explained, and we don't see how you as an athlete not going to a game will end up with your government like cutting off ties with Britain, which will probably harm your own country even more, because as the British currency is quite strong, when they buy your goods, your GDP remains stable. So we don't see where their conclusions come up from, and we think it's very harmful of them to assume that when they don't go to the Commonwealth Games, they end up with this bargaining power. We think it's better to hold our country leaders with a sense of responsibility and not allow them to get away with blaming the previous country and actually trying to solve these time-sensitive issues. So also and we see that a lot of things in general, so just a comparative of the harms, right? So the harms they brought up to you was for example, they strip off the culture and they strip, for example, they try to bring up to you on how Britain introduced the patriarchy. We are not sure exactly how that happened, and we don't think that that is very true, because even before that, India had castes. They had very extremely patriarchal systems where the bride was supposed to be burned with the husband, and the British actually banned these sort of very dangerous rituals, and so we see that blaming Britain for everything is a double-edged sword, and it's something that our countries should take a step back from and remain on a moral high ground to ensure that they keep on repairing instead of just blaming a country in no end. On side closing opposition, however, when we retain the moral high ground by accepting the peace, the only people we benefit is the people that we benefit is ourselves. And it's not that if you go on side government, the only people you're harming really is yourself as an athlete and as a country.